So what I'm going to be talking about is state. Specifically, what does state mean in a sort of distributed, microservices, and even eventually consistent architecture? So that applies to event sourcing as well. So let's start right at the beginning. When we were learning to program at first, we dealt with the concept of state in variables, which I've represented here by a car ignition. So it's like it's local, it's deterministic, you can read and write it at the same time, and it's well-defined and unambiguous. And that, you can look at that, you can definitely say that has a state that is currently locked, but that definitely. Then you sort of move on a bit, you learn a bit more, you learn about classes and things like that, and so you move up a bit and you end up with what we might call a service level or a class level state. So, there's some hiding, we don't know what the state of the engine is in the car, but we do know when the indicators are on and so on. And, but you can still pretty much say, a car has a state. You can describe the state quite well. But what happens when we go up yet another level? So is there a state here? I mean, a WAG would say, yes, it's clearly a US state, but what I mean specifically is there, could you say that there's a state here, especially if rather than a photo, we actually had, a live camera here. And it feels like there should be state. We've just gone up a level from what we were discussing before, and everything is deterministic in this. There's nothing quantum going on in the streets of New York. But, at the same time, it also feels like it depends. And I guess it does depend. But why does it depend? And it's all down to time. So time I've described as sort of the great disruptor. And the problem here is that the state of something can change while you're observing it. And when you get into something as complicated as a street, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So, you could be describing it and it can be changing at the same time. So let me drill down a little bit into what that means. So this is like what I call the hotel room example. So you have a concierge. We'll assume it's an English hotel. It has no telephones or anything like that. The concierge is asked the question, is there anyone in room 303? So they go off on another wander, check the room, and come all the way back. Now, what can the answer be here? See, the problem is that they can only answer yes or no as at the time when they were at the hotel room. So this is an example that you can use if you are in an eventually consistent system, or even just a system that's running quite slow. The truth of your system may be out of date because, because things have happened since you got your state. And, if you're looking at the usual software solutions like, transactions and locking, just bear in mind that it's considered bad form to lock the guests into their room or out of their room just to count them. So that's the first thing that can be confusing about state. The second one is what I call the global bank example. And this is to do with how fast information can travel. So let's say we have this situation arising at what I'm going to, for the purpose of this, call the same time. So what is the state of that transaction? What is the state of my bank account if these two things happened? And it kind of depends where you are, because the information from both of those will travel out. So you have a situation where realistically, where you are, where the privileged observer is, will determine what the state is. So if you were in, in this case, if you were in, say, Egypt, I would be overdrawn, and if you were in South America, I would be in credit. So assuming I spent all my money on this Land Rover, which is quite possible. Okay, so what is the trouble with time? So when it comes down to event sourcing and just distributed state, basically the trouble with time is no entity can know the present state of any other entity. So when we're doing any sort of processes that require us to know the state of another entity, we have to accept the fact that that state is going to be out of date, or it could potentially be out of date. So that's just something we have to be aware of. And that's basically, that is explaining what the problem is. And I'm not going to give you a solution to this, because there are lots of solutions and there are also no solutions, because as I've said, this is like physics. This we can't really solve it fully. But the big takeaway is that when you have a conversation with a business person or your analysis or whatever, however you're having these conversations, and you hear the word is expressed in the requirements, you need to sort of dig down a little bit and say, what do you mean by is? And specifically, you're looking for is recently good enough. If not, you're going to have to work around it.